before as well. So I'm just going to go back to my slides here. And I suppose what some of you were discussing and really linked to this idea of relationship-centred care. So you mentioned there, Janice, about person-centred care, and relationship care really builds on that, I suppose. So the idea that with person-centred care, I suppose it's about finding out what matters to the person, working with that person to create a care plan that matters to them. Relationship care kind of starts to look at not just the person receiving care, but everybody within that caring process. So that it's in the context of care homes, it's residents, it's staff, it's relatives as well. And relationship-centred care, so Nick talked about Mike Nolan's work, the census framework at the beginning of the presentation. So it was a good few years ago that they carried out very extensive research actually and developed this framework that what they said was if we can work towards meeting these 6 senses for everyone in the caring relationship.
Sorry, Tracy, you couldn't mute. Sorry, Tracy, just there's some of the background sounds coming in. Sorry.
Sorry,
Tracy.
Sorry.
That's
Thank
okay.
you.
I'm looking on my phone, you see, I can't read what's coming up on my screen.
It's just, if you can mute, that'd be great. It's not in the end.
Oh, what am I doing now?
Hey,
Thank
perfect.
you. So yeah, the census framework. So Nolan and colleagues, they talked about if we can meet these 6 senses, if we can feel these 6 senses for staff, residents and relatives, then these enriched environments of care and learning are realised. So the idea of a sense of security. So to feel safe, not just physically, but psychologically safe. And again, it's not just about the resident feeling safe, obviously that's crucially important, but it's about a relative feeling safe to come into the care home, to be able to ask staff questions about their relative receiving care. The sense of belonging, so that idea of feeling part of things, feeling part of a group, so that again, perhaps residents feeling part of a community in the care home, that students when they start their placement feel part of the team, that they're not just labelled as the student. Okay, a sense of continuity then. So that idea to be able to make links between someone's past, what's happening in the present and what they want to aim for in the future. And again, you know, we talked some of your feedback there about really important about knowing residents' past and how that influences the care that we provide. But that's equally as important for a student nurse, for example, that we ask a student, what's their experience before coming into a care home? What do they want to gain out of the experience? That idea of a sense of purpose so that people have goals. So for residents, relatives and staff, again, and they have something meaningful to work towards. A sense of achievement, the idea that we can reach those goals, that it means something to us when we achieve those goals. So for perhaps for a staff member, being able to having an idea about career progression and where they want to be and being able to achieve that's important. And a sense of significance, to feel that we matter, that we're valued, that we're contributing something that people recognise us as something that's important. So there's the idea that if everyone can feel all of these senses, then we have these enriched environments of care. However, what I would also say is that enhances the learning environment as well, if people feel these senses. And that's what my study started to unpick a little bit. So one of the key learning opportunities, again, there's a huge amount of learning opportunities in care homes. But one of the, I suppose, the unique ones when we started to compare it to perhaps a more acute setting is this idea that we can learn how to do relationships. So relationships are really at the heart of what we learn, and also the heart of how we learn. So we can learn how to enhance these positive relationships, because you're all experts at this. I've seen it through my own life and through my research. And through having strong relationships, that enhances our learning as well. So I wanted to just share one little example, because I think what I started to do in my study was drill down some of the finer detail of the census framework. So for example, with the sense of belonging, I looked at kind of what helped people to feel that sense of belonging. So one of the themes I had was called sharing our wee mistakes, or a Scottish term, sorry, but that's how I'd labelled it there. So I've just put this quote here, and it's from a new carer to the care home. And she said, "It was really helpful when staff tell me about their experiences when they started. For example, someone told me they'd put a resident's dress on the wrong way around, and it helped me connect with them." So this kind of sense of humility, I was starting to notice when people were sharing when they'd done things wrong, that started to help people to connect. It started to form those relationships, and in turn help them learn how to do relationships as well. So again, kind of drilling down that relationship-centered practice, one key aspect of relationships are these everyday moments of human connection. So relationships are built on little moments of connection that are happening every day. And what's happening, what I noticed in the study, what's happening in care homes, is that there's real opportunity to learn about these moments of human connection through the everyday moments of human connection. So really there were opportunities to learn every day, because of the expertise that care home staff hold in connecting with another human. So a little example I had, I remembered working alongside some staff one day, and I noticed a senior carer. It was at lunchtime, and the senior carer was telling a new carer how best to support a resident. And she said, this resident can get quite distressed sometimes when you remove his plate at lunchtime. However, if you just swap his plate with another course, so for example, take his soup away and give him his main course, he's much more settled. And I remember feeding this back to the senior carer, and she was quite surprised that this was something to celebrate. But for me, that was a real unique way that she'd tuned into this resident and what mattered to them. And in the moment, she was sharing this with another member of staff. So what I kind of wanted to do is how can we zone in more? How can we delve in and really amplify these everyday moments of connection that we can learn from? Oh. So just another couple of quotes here really that emphasize that finding from the study. So in the event I held where I brought everyone together to look at the quotes that I'd discovered so far, what one of the participants had said was that when they looked at learning in care homes, they discovered it was about helping people to connect to the whole system in its entirety. It was about connection with staff, with residents, with relatives, and then being able to connect that learning. And a staff nurse said to me as well that what they thought was a unique learning opportunity in care homes is how to approach and get to know people. And again, in the breakout room I was in with Jane, we were just talking about that. So for an example I had was in the context of learning about medicine administration. Yes, it's important to learn the drug, the side effects, how to deliver that drug. But what was really unique in the care home I noticed is that people were learning how to approach the resident to be able to take that medicine. So I remember the staff nurse saying, so if you go into this person's room, they like you to come in very quietly and gently, whereas another resident's room, they would say that they liked you to come in all kind of guns blazing and morning, how are you? So that kind of whole difference in how to connect to individuals, and that's what the students were taking from their learning. So one of the, what I also started to notice was a lot of the approaches I used in my study to find out what the learning opportunities were actually became approaches to amplify the learning opportunities in themselves. So a method I used was, as I've said already, was working alongside staff, residents and relatives to really pick up these practices that could be celebrated. Now, initially I called this observation, but what I found was when I said to people, I'm going to come in and do an observation, that people started to feel a little bit apprehensive, that they looked at the term observation with, you know, somebody kind of casting an eye on them, looking for what they were doing wrong. Whereas actually what I was doing was working with people to spot and notice beautiful practices that I could then feed back with them. So we use this term noticing. So I used noticing to get to pick up the information that was going to help me with my study. But then when we worked together, we realized that noticing actually identified these learning opportunities, noticing opportunities to share learning every day. So I just love this picture of the boy with the magnifying glass there. And one of the things with noticing, so it wasn't just spotting the interactions, it was noticing how people respond to feedback. So again, with feedback, we perhaps often think of feedback as being in a supervision situation where your mentor or your manager is giving you feedback on your performance. But I started to really notice the informal feedback or subtle and nuanced feedback that was happening every day. And I've just got this lovely example here from a student nurse, just to kind of amplify that there. So she talked about working with a resident. She said, you've got them up and dressed and you're walking along and they reach out their arm for you to support them. And it shows that trust, I think, as you're building a rapport with them. And I think that shows, right, they're trusting me to do this. I'm obviously doing this correctly. So that's one hint, their body language, and if they're talking to me. So that little tiny moment of connection where the resident was given something, you know, just a tiny movement to hold on to the student's hand, she was recognizing that she was getting her care right in that moment. And through the conversation with the student, so this was a conversation I had with the student at the time, she was able to recognize that learning and reflect on that learning. So it was about noticing the learning, but also then having a conversation around that as well, which helped to really celebrate it. So another theme kind of running through the study was, and again, this has already been discussed a bit in the beginning of the presentation, is the idea that in care homes, we all learn together. It's all about we. Okay, so it's not just about staff learning, it's not just about students learning, it's about everyone learning together. So I saw staff learning from students, students learning from residents, relatives learning from staff, you know, etc. And I think this is something that is quite, what I think is quite unique about care homes. I've got a couple of examples, again, of just some quotes to emphasize this. So in the event that I held where we were looking at all of the quotes that I'd gathered so far, a participant reflected on some of the quotes that were there, and they said people were learning from everyone. They were learning from different staff members, they were learning from residents. I thought it was a lovely learning environment because people weren't defensive about who they were learning from. They were appreciating gaining the skills and knowledge, and it was cross-pollinated. And I think there's something unique about care homes in that when we compare perhaps to more acute settings, there's a real kind of lack of hierarchy. Everyone's really part of a community. So from my experience, I used to work in the acute setting, and yes, we would work with relatives, we would you know, learn from relatives, we would try to explore with relatives what was best for the patient, but they were still very much a visitor. Whereas in care homes, I do see that what I notice it as something very different, that they were a real part of the community. I saw relatives coming in with gardening tools to, you know, to help the garden look better for the residents. They were a real part of things, and I think that is something that is different about care homes. There wasn't the same hierarchy in terms of, well, you know, the charge nurse knows better than the student nurse. People were learning from everyone, and I think there's opportunity to hone in to that.
Sorry, Tamsin, just Huawei P20 Lite. You couldn't mute, could you, slightly? We can hear the background. Thank you very much. Oh, bless you. Thank you.
Okay. Just another quote there, again from the same event, that someone said, learning care homes about learning together where everyone is involved and we are one expert amongst many. We can sometimes forget to ask. It's been so good having a relative at our table. We have learned so much from her. So again, this learning was happening from and with everyone every day, but there's perhaps opportunities to really celebrate it. And one of the ways that we can enhance learning is through storytelling. And I know that the next workshop is around storytelling. So when we share stories of our practice and we discuss it, that's when learning can really happen. And I wanted to share this. This is one of my favourite stories from the study. And we're just going to then have a bit of an activity where we just talk about the story, and I've got some questions around it. So this was a carer in one of the care homes. And she said to me that she was talking about an interaction with a resident. She said, this day was really good because I hadn't realised how much that particular resident liked dominoes. I'd been a bit unsure how to play dominoes and worried about my dyscalculia, but it was actually quite easy and quite enjoyable. I did learn from her because she would speak out loud what the next piece needed to be. She would say a 6 or a 4, and then I would look and see what it had, and it helped me rather than having to count the dots up myself. So it was a good tip she gave me. It was fun. When I went home that night, my daughter came home from school with a set of dominoes, and I was so pleased I was able to play with her. So I just love that example because one, the carer learned about the resident. They learned that they like to play dominoes, but the resident had taught, I remember that she was really apprehensive about getting involved in the game, and just that lovely ending to the story that she went home and it happened to be that her daughter wanted to play dominoes with her, and she'd learned that from the resident in the care home. So we're going to use that story in the breakout rooms. And we're going to, we'll give you a chance to read through it again and discuss the story. And I've got some prompt questions that will just help you explore the story a bit further. So these prompt questions, they're taken from an aspect of the My Home Life programme, which is called Life Storytelling. So LIFE stands for Learning and Innovating from Everyday Excellence. So the prompt questions are first to have a read of the story and think, what is there to celebrate in this story? What perhaps stands out for you? Then have a think about, having read the story, is there anything you're wondering about or curious about in relation to learning in care homes? And then finally, just to have a think about, what stories could you share about learning in care homes, and who might you share these stories with? So we're going to just move again to breakout rooms, maybe with a few more people this time, to explore that story, have a chat through those questions, and yeah, it might trigger some more stories about learning in care homes for yourself. So I think we're going to have 15 minutes to do that, and then come back and